Welcome back to St Helens Training. In our last overview session, we left Israel having got into the land as God's people, but they were facing a fork in the road. Moses and Joshua had both warned them that they must keep their promise to obey God, to treat Him as God, if they want to experience His blessings permanently and not His curses. And yet within a generation of Joshua, in the book of Judges, well, things deteriorate fast. A cycle begins of Israel's sin and God's judgment as He hands them over to enemies in the land. And yes, when they cry out, God is gracious to raise up a saviour and a leader, but the leader dies and the cycle begins again. We've seen, though, a leader can help, and so when God gives Israel a king, firstly King Saul, well, perhaps this is the moment where they'll be led in obedience. But sadly, Saul, though looking good at the start, turns into a tragedy because he is not obedient. Samuel puts it like this to him: "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Because you've rejected the word of the Lord, He's rejected you in being king." So a king can help, but he must be obedient. We then move on to David, who is a king after God's heart. He seems like great news. He defeats Israel's enemies. He brings rest to the land. And though he's not perfect, God makes a huge promise to him. So we skip on to 2 Samuel 7. It's actually a moment when David is offering to do something for God, build him a house. But God turns that round and says, grace works different to that. I'm going to build you a house. God makes a promise that David's throne will last forever. The prophet Samuel again says to him, "Your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever." It's another massive moment in the Bible. It's our big promise for this session. People call it the Davidic covenant. And just as with Abraham, God committed himself to one family, well, so now He's committing Himself to one throne. Just as we know blessing will come through Abraham's line, well, now we know it will come in the kingdom of David, under the throne of the son of David. And when Solomon comes along, David's son, well, it looks like it's really happening. Solomon's kingdom is the high point of the Old Testament. It's as close as we get to Eden. The land is expanded and fruitful and prosperous. It's a safe place, a great place. The people are united and happy, led by a wise king, the envy of the nations. There is a great people. And best of all, there is relationship with God. Solomon builds a house for God. He builds a temple, a more permanent version of the tabernacle where God dwelt with His people in Exodus. And it seems like the good life is back. But tragically, Solomon turns to idolatry. The king who was supposed to lead the people in righteousness actually leads them into worshipping false gods. And as the years roll on, well, the people gladly follow. And so the king and the people break their covenant promise. They do not treat God alone as God. But God keeps His side of the Mosaic deal. He stays faithful to His word, bringing judgment onto the kingdom. First, straight after Solomon in 922, the kingdom is split. So 10 tribes in the north are torn away from the Davidic throne, which is now called Judah, the southern kingdom, with the north called Israel. Then, after even worse kings and years of further idolatry, well, the northern kingdom is exiled to Assyria in 722 BC. But even with that, Judah doesn't learn the lesson from their brothers. And so, after further idolatry and sin, well, God hands Judah, the southern kingdom, the Davidic throne, over to conquest and exile by Babylon in 587. Now that may sound like fairly dull ancient history, but we need to remember what's at stake here. The exile is a massive moment reverberating around the Old Testament. It is the fall of Israel, and it's every bit as shocking and tragic as the fall of Adam. So just as humanity plunged from God's blessing and favour to his curse in Genesis 3, well, so through 1 and 2 Kings, Israel repeats the process. By disobeying God, by thinking the good life is to be found apart from him, by rejecting his loving rule, they've brought calamity on themselves. They lose everything he had graciously given. And it really is everything. From the high point of Solomon's kingdom, well, the experience on the ground drops and drops and drops. As the kingdom splits, the north is exiled, the south goes to Babylon. And it seems like all the progress we've made has been undone. Just look at the diagram, we're back where we started. Canaan gained a free gift from Yahweh, has been taken away by him. A people united as a nation are now scattered, decimated around Assyria and Babylon. And the relationship with God, centered on the temple built by Solomon, well, now the Holy of Holies has been stripped and broken. Relationship with God is in ruin. Which means in a very real sense, there's not been progress. There's no lasting achievement in God's promise to bless through Abraham's family. Just look at it. Temple built, temple burnt. Land gained, land lost. People united, people scattered. And why? Well, because of sin. This is one of the huge lessons from the history of Israel. It is a prototype rescue. It models much of what God needs to do, but it also shows there's a bigger problem. A far bigger rescue is needed. By the time of the exile, we realize that it's not just the curse, if you like, the effects of Adam's rebellion that need to be reversed, but actually the rebellion itself has to stop. God will not permanently bless a wicked people. And so we discover that we need a bigger rescue, a rescue from sin and not just curse. We need a bigger sacrifice than just animals, a better king than just David or Solomon, a greater priest than Aaron. The prototype was not enough. We need a full solution to sin. That's the massive lesson of the Old Testament. And it is a lesson we desperately need today. Ask around the offices or coffee shops or pubs near here, and I guess most people will say, yes, we make mistakes as humanity, but deep down we're essentially good. We could follow God if we wanted to. And society's problems could be solved if we just had better education or greater incentives or fairer, firmer punishment. But the unfolding Bible story proves that humanity is not good deep down, and that the problem is serious. Notice that the fall of Israel echoes the fall of Adam. That is, twice in the Bible the good life is lost. It wasn't just Adam, but even Israel, even God's own people, having witnessed God rescue them, even his own people in his own land with his own law, cannot or will not worship God alone as God. So then we need more than just fresh starts. It didn't work with Noah, it didn't work with Canaan. We need more than just clear instructions. After all, Israel had the law at Sinai, a perfect law and clear revelation in Egypt. We need more than firm punishment. There are lots of warning shots. We need more than just good religious works, because the costly animal sacrifices were not enough to cover the debt. The point is this: if even Israel, with all those privileges, well, if even they didn't treat God rightly, if even they faced his fearsome judgment, well, then no one is righteous, not even one. No one gets close to the glory of God. You see, the story reveals what man is really like. and we are in real trouble. But the scary thing is, we've also seen what God is really like. He is pure and righteous, holy and true. He will not be bribed or bent. He will not lower his standards of justice. So to think that he'll just sit by smiling while creatures he's made ignore him and abuse each other and worship gifts he's given them, things he's created, well, it's ridiculous. The story of Israel proves that while wicked people may experience his gracious blessing for a time, well, blessing won't be permanent. All of which means if there's going to be any solution, any rescue, any happy ending, well, it's going to have to be a deeper rescue than the prototype. It must be a rescue that fully deals with sin. You see, we don't just need a teacher or a healer or a miracle worker. We need a sin saviour. By the time of the exile, we're looking for rescue not just from the curse, the effects of what Adam did, but from sin, the rebellion of Adam himself. Tune in next time to see how the prophets begin to answer that question.